Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, you can. The appeal, or memorial, from the women of Wales to the women of the United States in 1923-24 to work together for peace grew out of the continuing impact of the First World War, the fear that this devastating experience could be repeated, and a determination that women could and should play a vital role in finding a way to prevent such a disaster. The Welsh Women's Peace Petition was one of the earliest and most imaginative attempts during the interwar period to involve large numbers of citizens in a practical act of internationalism. The war affected every city, town, village and street in Wales. Wales sent 270,000 of its people to serve in the armed forces, and 40,000 of them died. Many of those who survived the war suffered lifelong physical and psychological injuries, which also affected the families of those war veterans, especially the women in those families who would spend a considerable part of their lives looking after them. During the war, women had taken on new roles. Many women became the heads of households. Working class women increasingly took jobs in manufacturing that directly supplied the war effort, whether that was making textiles for uniforms or the difficult and dangerous job of making munitions. Moving into these masculinized jobs brought women new skills and higher wages, although care was taken to prevent women from earning as much as the men they replaced. For many women, war work involved nursing, either as a continuation of professional roles or as volunteers, while others still joined one of the women's corps in the armed forces, such as the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps. The war itself divided the international women's movement for peace and women's rights. Some women activists placed a higher priority on continuing to work for peace, while others believed it was their duty to support their own country's war efforts, and also that by demonstrating their ability to contribute to the war, women would earn the rights of equal citizenship, especially the right to vote. Other women argued strongly that women should claim the vote as their right and not as a reward for war work. One woman who made this argument was Wales' Winifred Cwm Tennant, who was nominated by Lloyd George to be a representative at the League of Nations. The League of Nations was established in 1920 as part of the Treaty of Versailles and reflected a vision of the future where international disputes would be resolved peacefully and war would be actively prevented by the great nations of the world coming together in dialogue to be the arbiter of international differences and the instrument for removing injustice. The League of Nations was the first large-scale international organization in the world, and Winifred Cwm Tennant was the first woman to represent a member state of the League. But while some women gained the right to vote in the aftermath of the First World War, and in theory, more professions began to open to women, in practical terms, the opportunities for many ordinary women were still very limited. Women who had taken on men's roles during the war were hastily pushed out of paid employment, so that men, returning from military service, would have jobs. But women continued to become active politically and socially. Women in local communities throughout Wales carried out fundraising and charitable work, as well as fulfilling numerous commitments to their own families, and many became engaged in activities to improve society at all levels, including working for world peace. The search to find a path to a more durable peace was the mission of the Welsh League of Nations Union, a Wales-wide movement that was established in 1920, part funded by a Liberal MP from Montgomeryshire, David Davis of Llandinam. Davis had himself fought in the war and was a passionate believer in the urgency of preventing such a conflict from ever again taking place, and who also believed in the potential of the League of Nations to bring peace to the world. He first publicly advocated the creation of a Welsh League of Nations Union to support the work of the League in 1918 at the National Eisteddfod, saying that Wales should play a special role in the campaign for world peace. The Welsh League of Nations Union grew rapidly, and by 1922 it had 280 local branches. The Welsh League of Nations Union was directed by the Reverend Gwilym Davies and embraced by Welsh people from all segments of society and political views, including religious leaders and also educators. The Welsh League of Nations Union had an advisory education committee that worked with teachers to help develop young minds and direct children and young people towards ideas about peace and the peaceful resolution to international problems. There was a great deal of synergy between the various organisations in Wales that work for peace. For example, the Welsh League of Nations Union worked with the Gobaith Cymru, Welsh League of Youth, created in 1922. It was the Reverend William Davies who suggested that the children of Wales should send out a greeting of friendship to the children of other countries. The Welsh League of Nations Union had a direct connection through the Reverend William Davies to the Welsh School of Social Service, an organisation created in 1911 by liberal intellectuals and activists that was dedicated to the discussion of social problems and sought to make churches more aware of their responsibility to society. Davies was the honorary secretary of the Welsh School of Social Service, which initiated a peace movement for women in Wales in August 1922. Some of the women who played leading roles in the Welsh Women's Appeal to America were also prominent in the Welsh School of Social Service. It was at a meeting of the Welsh School of Social Service on the 23rd of April 1923 that a memorial from the women of Wales to the women of the United States was suggested. In the United States at that time, there was widespread mood in favour of isolationism. The US Senate had rejected the Versailles Treaty in March of 1920, and with it US membership of the League of Nations. The US presidential election in November 1920 was won by Warren Harding, whose main campaign promise was to keep the United States out of global affairs. The idea behind an appeal from the women of Wales to the women of America was that if American women could exert their moral authority on their government to join the League of Nations, then the world would be saved from further bloodshed in the future. The Welsh League of Nations Union meeting in Aberystwyth on the 23rd of May 1923 formally adopted the proposal for a women's memorial or appeals and set in motion the events that we will now hear much more about.
Diolch yn fawr I ti, Jenny. Wel, nawr te, ni'n mynd ar y